This is about the security of our entire continent, now and in future.
Of course, it hurts a lot, and we are waiting for this war to stop, but not on these terms.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Monday evening to you. I'm Stephanie Liebergen here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From Republican Party infighting as Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene plans her retirement from Congress, to newly unsealed court documents detailing alleged harms to children that social media companies ignored. But first, we started the morning with a report on peace talks between Russia and Ukraine from our international correspondent in Geneva. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says peace talks in Geneva made progress toward ending the Russian-Ukraine war. Rubio called Sunday's discussions, quote, very worthwhile, but didn't provide many details. The talks focus on a controversial U.S. peace plan that European allies say is too favorable to Russia. President Trump set a Thursday deadline for Ukraine to respond to the proposal. And all of this happening as Russian drone strikes hit residential areas in Kharkiv, killing at least 4 people overnight. Regional officials say 13 others were injured and 8 residential buildings were damaged. Ukraine's Air Force reports Russia launched 162 drones across the country. Air defenses shot down 125 of them, but 37 reached their targets. And Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen joining me now live from Geneva, Switzerland for a bit more on these talks. So Ross, you are on the ground there in Geneva. What are you learning about any progress these talks are making?
Well, Stephanie, I can tell you that the Coalition of the Willing, which is a group of Ukraine's allies, including France, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand and many European nations as well. They've agreed to have a meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, to try to digest what has been happening this weekend, to try to understand more about the United States and Ukraine and what happened when Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, was here in Geneva on Sunday, meeting Andriy Yermak, who is Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff for those meetings. There was also a meeting earlier in the day on Sunday between European national security advisors and the Ukrainian delegation as well, to put forward Europe's proposals to make sure that any future peace deal is tilted more heavily in favor of Ukraine, as opposed to that original document from a couple of days ago, which certainly seemed to favor Russia. Europe also wants to make sure that its own security is enshrined in any future peace deal. So we did have that meeting on Sunday, and certainly Marco Rubio, speaking to reporters here in Geneva, Switzerland, Stephanie, was over the moon with how it went. He said it was the best meeting between a delegation from Washington and a delegation from Kiev so far this year. It was very positive. Tremendous progress had been made. It was very constructive. It was very productive, certainly. So he felt it went very well, and he can take that message back now to Washington. And there will be further technical talks continuing between Ukraine and the United States as we head towards a possible Trump-Zelensky summit.
Well, Russia has previously been shooting down really any proposal for peace, and they've been shooting down Ukrainian calls for a ceasefire. So considering where things are today after this presumably very productive weekend, is there any possibility of a ceasefire in the near future?
Well, Stephanie, Ukraine is also spending every night trying to shoot down incoming drones and missiles. And as you mentioned, there was a deadly attack on Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv, and that is happening while Marco Rubio and the Ukrainian delegation are locked in talks. So there is the war continues, as we know, while the delegations are trying to find a way forward, trying to find a new version of this 28-point peace proposal. Potentially, Marco Rubio is saying it's very much up for discussion. It's a living, breathing document that can be changed. Certainly when it comes to a ceasefire, the United States, Ukraine, the European Union, China, Turkey, they are all in favor of an immediate halt to the fighting, but Russia is not, because Moscow is continuing to make incremental gains in the east of Ukraine. However, if the United States and Ukraine and Europe can all agree and sign off on a peace deal, and then it's presented to Russia, perhaps President Trump could bring some pressure to bear on President Putin to agree to a peace accord and a ceasefire in Ukraine. Stephanie?
Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen from Geneva for us this morning. Thank you very much. Right now, I want to bring in our very own Scripps News Deputy Political Director, Joe St. George. Joe, I want to ask you about another international issue, and that is Venezuela. The Trump administration really putting some more restraints on its leader, Nicolas Maduro. And what do we know about kind of how relations are there between the U.S. and Venezuela?
Well, as the Trump administration is trying to get peace in Eastern Europe, there is a big question mark as to what's the next steps for the U.S. military in the Caribbean, in South America. We haven't seen a buildup of this military presence in the Caribbean in generations. The U.S. carrier Gerald Ford's Carrier Strike Group, that's the most advanced naval carrier strike group in the United States Navy. They've been in the region now for days. There's been military exercises in recent weeks in Trinidad and Tobago. What is this all for? Now, we've been reporting on these efforts to target these drug smuggling boats. We've seen that effort by the Trump administration for many weeks now, many months now. North of 80 individuals have been killed. But is this really about drugs coming into the U.S., or is this about potentially regime change in Venezuela? Nicolas Maduro is not recognized by the United States government as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. They believe that election was fraudulent. Venezuela's country, obviously proximity-wise, close-ish to the United States, but that does have ties to Iran, ties to China, some of America's non-allies, and this morning, new developments in that the Secretary of State Marco Rubio has designated Maduro as top government allies as now a foreign terrorist organization, which will allow President Trump to issue new sanctions. In recent days, the FAA has issued warnings to pilots to exercise caution when flying near Venezuela because of the increased military activity. Does the FAA know something? Does Sean Duffy know something, the Secretary of Transportation, that is not being passed along? A number of commercial airlines canceled flights over the weekend as a direct result of all of this. Venezuela has been staging military exercises of their own, calling up people of their own. They've talked about the desire to have diplomatic discussions, that war is not the answer. But as Reuters is reporting this morning, we have not independently confirmed this reporting at the Scripps News Group, but Reuters is reporting that we could be seeing an escalation in the U.S. involvement in Venezuela in the coming days. So we got to really be focused on our geography these days, don't we, Steph? We got Eastern Europe, we've got the Middle East, and now we have whatever is bubbling in the Caribbean with Venezuela.
A lot of international stories for us to keep our eyes on this week. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, thank you very much, sir. Coming up on Today As It Happened, amid turmoil between President Donald Trump and firebrand Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Georgia Republican announced her retirement from Congress. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed has reactions straight ahead. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's return to our briefing of today's top stories. Israel says it killed Hezbollah's chief of staff in the first strike on southern Beirut in months. Lebanon's health ministry reports 5 people were killed and more than 24 injured in Sunday's attack. The IDF says the strike was meant to prevent Hezbollah from strengthening its capabilities. Hezbollah called it a treacherous Israeli attack. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel won't allow Hezbollah to rebuild its power. TSA workers are getting some financial relief just in time for the holidays. A spokesperson says 90% of workers have received their back pay now that the government shutdown is over. The rest will get their money by today. Now, TSA workers missed several paychecks during the country's longest shutdown. The timing is crucial as TSA expects to screen nearly 18 million travelers during the Thanksgiving week. The political world is still reacting to major news. Marjorie Taylor Greene is resigning from Congress amid her very public feud with President Trump. The president on Truth Social calling her a traitor, among other things. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is here in the D.C. studio with me to help kind of understand how we got here. So Nate, what led to this kind of surprise announcement we got from her over the weekend?
Well, if your neck hurts, I kind of understand that. It's total whiplash. I mean, this is someone who'd supported President Trump vocally pretty much all the way through, one of his most vocal backers in Congress even when he was kind of out in the proverbial woods after he lost the presidency in 2020. Obviously, his very well-publicized comeback to taking the presidency again in 2024, and she had stuck by him that entire time. There were a couple moments, though, in recent months that there was kind of growing tension, if you will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Between the two people. Marjorie Taylor Greene backing this insurgent effort with mostly Democrats to try and release all of the files related to the disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. That was something that she did against the wishes of Republican congressional leadership, House Speaker Mike Johnson. Ultimately, that led to a huge rift, not only within the party, but between her and President Donald Trump. He started to post things about her, negative about her, starting just a couple of weeks ago, saying that she had kind of become one with Congressman Thomas Massie, who President Trump has had a well-known feud with in the past. The Congresswoman posting a video announcing her decision to not seek re-election and furthermore resign from Congress a year early up on Twitter. This was on Friday. I want you to listen to just a portion of this and what she gives as her rationale for stepping aside early. Take a listen.
Loyalty should be a two-way street, and we should be able to vote our conscience and represent our district's interests because our job title is literally representative. Standing up for American women who were raped at 14 years old, trafficked and used by rich, powerful men should not result in me being called a traitor and threatened by the President of the United States, whom I fought for.
And what's interesting here is that disagreement between the two of them kind of echoed by President Donald Trump over the weekend. He was asked his reaction to the fact that she is now stepping down from Congress early, that she is no longer seeking re-election, even though reportedly she believes she would have been able to win a primary if he had launched one against her, something that he did threaten to do. The president had this to say. I want you to listen.
Are you willing to forgive Congresswoman Taylor Greene?
Forgive for what? No, I just disagreed with her philosophy. She started backing perhaps the worst Republican congressman in our history, this stupid person named Massie. And I said, go your own way. And once I left her, she resigned because she would never have survived a primary. But I think she's a nice person.
And you heard in there that kind of criticism of Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, President Trump, launching a campaign challenge against Thomas Massie with his backing in Kentucky. He thinks that Marjorie Taylor Greene is now someone who's followed in his footsteps, become somewhat of an obstructionist for his agenda. The Congresswoman trying to clarify that over the last several weeks, ultimately, though, announcing that she was going to step aside after a lot of these threats started to trickle through. She was very public and vocal, saying that she was suddenly receiving threats. Worth noting that she kind of entered Congress. She was this kind of citizen journalist looking to investigate Democrats. And what was interesting was in this resignation letter, she basically said there's no game of 4D chess. There's no big plan behind the scenes, not just seemingly about what Republicans are looking to do with their majority in Congress, but also her own plans. The question of where she goes from here.
I personally find it interesting that all of this fallout started because of her support of the discharge petition for the Epstein files to be released, but then ultimately President Trump signed that bill. President Trump counted against a bill, and it was an overwhelming bipartisan support in both chambers. It's interesting to me that they weren't able to walk back their relationship in some way when the president changed his support for that effort.
Correct. And it was the fact that the president kind of had that huge change of heart there on that Epstein files bill. I mean, he had reportedly campaigned privately against it for a very long time, ultimately flipping kind of at the 11th hour to say, no, you should vote for this thing. Don't worry, support it.
Opening the
I'll back
floodgates
it.
for
Correct.
Republicans.
Opening the floodgates. But that was kind of in the face of a number of moderate Republicans and some conservative Republicans starting to say that they would back this thing, effectively flipping away from the president's reportedly private position on not wanting to back this bill. And what's interesting here was, the numbers were definitely getting away from him. I spoke with Congressman Massie in the days before that vote happened, before the president publicly flipped his position, and he was, quite clear with me. He cast this as not a referendum on the president necessarily, but a referendum on individual members of Congress. The fact that this vote, the president's obviously term limited, this vote is something that will probably outlive the president, for races to come, whether it's 26, 28, 2030. I mean, the question of just how this could reflect on the record of covering up for someone who is a convicted sex offender, at least that was the way that had been cast in the past. Obviously, a bit of an oversimplification about the politics at play here. The question is, what will Marjorie Taylor Greene do now? That
do we know?
We do not know. She had kind of not shied away from saying that whether she would run for governor or senator in the past. She then very publicly said that she was not running for either of those positions. There was some reporting, again, not that we at Scripps have been able to verify ourselves, that President Trump had been pushing her to shy away from runs in both of those areas. But again, in large part because of what she would have seen in a general election, the question of whether she could have made it out of the primary and then through the general, winning the election for Republicans in Georgia, obviously a state that has become more purple in recent years. Senator John Ossoff, he's got a very well-publicized re-election bid in that state. Certainly, there's a chance that she could run for higher office. I think we do not know what her future is at this point. We do know that when she comes back to Congress for December, that'll be kind of her last 3 weeks under the big cast iron dome. Her next moves, those we just do not know yet.
Well, and it's always worth talking about as well when we are talking about the House is the very, very slim majority that Republicans have. Losing Marjorie Taylor Greene means they will be down one Republican vote in a very, very slim Congress.
Correct. It no doubt makes Speaker Johnson's job more difficult. Worth noting, though, Mikey Sherrill, now governor-elect of New Jersey, she just resigned as well. So that's one Democrat, now one Republican resigning. So that the margins kind of remain difficult. The question is, how quickly is the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, able to hold a special election in Georgia's 14th? How quickly could he fill that seat? Now that she's announced her intent to resign, is that the sort of thing that he could schedule a primary for now? We do not know. Either way, those slim margins that Speaker Johnson has had since the beginning of this Congress, those remain slim. And then obviously you've got the question of running a whole new candidate, whole new campaign in Georgia's 14th.
Probably a safe Republican seat?
Probably a safe Republican seat. This is kind of one of the seats that is certainly, I think viewed as a safe R. She had a Democratic challenger last time around. There was a Democrat who ran against her. Ultimately, I think President Trump overperformed her in that district, according to the New York Times. So a lot of questions about, how well a Republican can do without President Trump's name at the top of the ballot. I think that's a question we're going to see nationally in 2026.
Absolutely.
And, we'll have plenty more to say about that.
We will have a busy few years, my friend. Nathaniel Reed, our congressional correspondent, thank you very much. We'll be back in just a moment as we continue tracking today's top stories. The Pentagon is launching an investigation into Senator Mark Kelly and threatening to court-martial him. I'm Stephanie Liebergen in Washington. Kelly was one of several Democratic lawmakers who posted a video online last week urging troops to defy illegal orders. In a statement, the Pentagon suggested that Kelly's remarks interfered with the loyalty, morale, or good order and discipline of the armed forces. Kelly served in the U.S. Navy as a fighter pilot before going on to become an astronaut and then a senator. A former aide to two New York governors is on trial for allegedly selling her influence to the Chinese government. Linda Sun and her husband, Christopher Hugh, are also accused of illegally profiting from the state's face mask purchases during the COVID pandemic. The pair was arrested last year during a U.S. crackdown on alleged Chinese secret agents. They have pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Florida state senator is taking legislative action following a Scripps News investigation into drownings at vacation rental homes. Senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha is live with us with an update. And LJ, tell us what this proposed new law would do.
Hi, Andrew. Well, the state senator has proposed legislation in the past to encourage homeowners to install pool safety features because Florida has a significant number of child drownings every year. But after he saw our reporting on drownings at vacation rentals, he said he was determined to come up with a bill that would target this type of home.
312-1018.
This deputy is rushing to the scene of a child drowning at a vacation rental home in Okaloosa County, Florida.
How long?
I don't know. We don't know. We come out here and they got out the back door.
And this is footage of officers in Hollywood, Florida, trying to save two brothers, ages 3 and 1, who slipped into a vacation home pool.
I should have known better, and I swore the house had alarms.
Our Scripps News investigation found fatal and near-fatal vacation home drownings all over the state. That includes at least 50 children since 2021. It's a problem that Florida State Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith is working to fix. He spoke to us this summer.
That was an issue that we knew was a problem, but we didn't realize the extent of the problem until we saw some of this reporting that has been put together by Scripps News.
Smith filed 3 water safety bills this month, including one that would require people to install a pool safety feature, like an alarm or a fence, if they're trying to use their home as a vacation rental business.
It would be, in my opinion, a lot easier to get a bill passed through the Florida legislature and signed by the governor that perhaps at least just singles out short-term rentals where we know that these drownings are continuing to happen.
Smith has been trying unsuccessfully for years to require more owners of residential pools to install fences or other safety features, given the dramatic number of child drownings in his state. In 2025 so far, there have been at least 109 incidents. He's hoping his latest attempt, focusing on vacation rental homes, will save more lives.
More of today's top stories ahead on Today As It Happened. Stick with us. Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up right where we left off.
President Trump says he has accepted an invitation from Chinese President Xi Jinping to visit Beijing. Trump also invited him for a state visit to the U.S. later next year. The announcement came after the two leaders spoke by phone on Monday. They discussed Ukraine, fentanyl, the trade, and during that call, and President Trump says the relationship between the U.S. and China is extremely strong. A University of Alabama at Birmingham football player is accused of stabbing 2 teammates Saturday morning. The attack happened hours before the team's game against the University of South Florida. Daniel Mincy, a redshirt freshman offensive lineman, was arrested on charges of aggravated assault and attempted murder. The 2 wounded players are in stable condition. The stabbing occurred on campus at the football operations building. Despite the incident, the team decided to play their game to honor graduating seniors. Several players chose to sit out due to the incident. Counseling is being made available for players who want it. And turning now to some other headlines, newly unsealed court filings show the social media giant Meta may have known for years that its platforms were harming young people and alleged that the company kept those risks under wraps. Thousands of plaintiffs across families, school districts, and state attorneys general allege links to addiction, eating disorders, and self-harm. And they say that the company failed to disclose this information to the public or to Congress. Business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett has been digging through those documents. She joins us now. And Maura, a lot of new information coming to light. What are the highlights?
Well, Andrew, I think it's important to note off the top that this is the plaintiff's filing, right? So these are the people that are alleging all of these accusations against these 4 major tech companies, not just Meta. TikTok, Snapchat, and Google, which owns YouTube, is also named. And the plaintiffs are saying that they got this information from company staff testimony as well as internal company research. We haven't seen any counter filings placed yet, but this has been a long-standing lawsuit with more and more plaintiffs piling on in the last several years. And we're getting this information because these documents have just recently been unsealed. And we're learning through those conversations, the testimony that is laid out in these hundreds of pages of documents that were just unsealed. Some of it's still pretty heavily redacted, I will say, is that the plaintiffs are alleging that Meta had a high threshold for sex trafficking content. One former Meta staff basically laying out that if someone made made a violation in terms of sex trafficking, they could do it nearly 16 times before they got booted from the platform. And this staffer even expressed concern about that. And she had been a high level of seniority within the company. They went on to allege that Meta then lied to Congress when it said that it did not disclose its knowledge of harms on the platform, that it had opportunities to tell Congress and the public, quite frankly, about all of that, and that Meta's executives initially shelved efforts to make Instagram less toxic for teens. And so at the end of the day, the plaintiffs are basically saying that Meta made, and these other social media companies made their products they knew it was addictive, and they continued to build it that way because that drives usage and that drives business. And this is something that we've heard whistleblowers talk about. A lot of former staff come out and even testify before Congress with a lot of these claims. And so this is definitely in line with what we have heard before, but the specifics around the eating disorders, the self-harm, the mental health issues is really what these school districts, families, and states attorneys general are really expressing concern about. Now, I did reach out to Meta to get their comment. They wrote back in a statement that they strongly disagree with the allegations. They say they rely on cherry-picked quotes and misinformed opinions in an attempt to present a deliberately misleading picture. They said the full record will show that for over a decade, we've listened to parents, researched issues that matter most, and made real changes to protect teens. They went on to detail the work that they've done, like we've seen in the last year when it comes to teen accounts, specific protections in that sense. And so it is something they're saying, at least right now, what we're seeing publicly is they are prioritizing that. But a lot of these conversations, a lot of the allegations that are made in this lawsuit goes back several years, Andrew.
So, Maura, are there any other tech companies involved in any of these legal filings?
Right. This is a unprecedented, multi-factor, multi-state litigation case that we're looking at. There's all of these allegations against Meta, and we're seeing a lot of those specifics in this unsealed document. There's also Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube named as well, with very similar allegations around lack of safety. The master complaint alleges that all of those companies and their parent companies, quote, relentlessly pursued a strategy of growth at all costs, recklessly ignoring the impact of their products on children's mental and physical health. And as I said, this all purports to be based on sworn testimony, internal documents, other research. And so there are similar allegations when it comes to safety, especially around Snapchat and YouTube and the visual, the video addictiveness that we've seen with social media. Snapchat did just get back to me right before I came on air with you, saying that they also deny these allegations and say that their platform is purposefully built different than other social media platforms. There's also allegations against YouTube, Google, and TikTok. I have not gotten any response back from those platforms about this, but ultimately there is a lot of focus on the lack of harm regulation, specifically towards teens, kids, users, and that's a lot of what we've seen conversation on Congress, for example, and stalled action when it comes to how they regulate these tech companies to keep kids safe. And what we're seeing a lot of those lawmakers make the argument about is that the tech companies aren't doing it themselves. That's why they need lawmakers to step in. And so those are the details we're getting in these allegations and these court filings, that the tech companies aren't doing what they're saying they're putting forward publicly, though a lot of tech companies now in recent years, in recent months, in fact, have put out even more protections and more ways to monitor for parents for kids on their platforms, for example, Andrew.
All right, more to come here. Business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett for us. Maura, thank you.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
We feel as though we're in a very good place. Of course, we have to make sure that all of these points are agreed to, and then of course we're going to have to make sure the other party in this war, the Russians, agree to them as well.
Thanks again for joining us on Today As It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Ohio has become the 45th state to allow high school athletes to enter name, image, and likeness deals. The Ohio High School Athletic Association voted 447 to 121 to approve the referendum. The vote came after a lawsuit by a top football recruit who claimed he missed out on more than $100,000 in deals. The new bylaw goes into effect immediately. And reggae pioneer and actor Jimmy Cliff has died at age 81. His family says he died from a seizure followed by pneumonia. Cliff was known for many classics like Many Rivers to Cross and I Can See Clearly Now. He also starred in the landmark reggae film The Harder They Come in the early 1970s. Cliff was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010 and won 2 Grammy Awards. Now, President Donald Trump has repeatedly said achieving peace between Russia and Ukraine has been harder than he anticipated. A 28-point peace plan, which Ukraine says favors Russia, was not readily embraced, in particular part where Kyiv cedes territory to Moscow. So, top American and Ukrainian negotiators in Geneva this weekend had their work cut out for them, and today officials say they're making some progress. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is live for us with the latest. And Haley, where do these negotiations stand at this moment?
Well, Andrew, officials are expecting the conversations to continue over the coming days after those talks in Geneva on a potential peace plan. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that they made substantial progress, but also at the same time acknowledging work to be done, calling it a living, breathing document. But certainly the pace has picked up on these efforts to reach a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. Whether there is one that is agreeable to both sides remains to be seen. President Trump writing on Truth Social earlier today, quote, "Don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening," while this weekend also acknowledging it was not a final offer to Ukraine. Now, coming out of those talks in Geneva after the U.S. initially shared that 28-point peace plan that drew some concerns from some U.S. lawmakers as well as European officials over Russia's reaction to it, saying that it was favoring them essentially. U.S. officials and Ukrainian officials giving positive indicators after those talks in Geneva, working off that proposal as a framework. They issued a joint statement saying, quote, "The discussions showed meaningful progress toward aligning positions and identifying clear next steps." They reaffirmed that any future agreement must fully uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and deliver a sustainable and just peace, noting that they drafted an updated peace framework. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying this.
This will ultimately have to be signed off by our presidents, although I feel very comfortable about that happening given the progress we've made. And then obviously there's the Russian side of the equation. But again, we think we have some pretty substantial insights over the last 9 months into some of the things that are really important to them.
Now, Rubio also called it one of the most productive and meaningful meetings thus far, but again, also acknowledging work remaining, including on what he described as semantics and others requiring a higher discussion, but saying some is not insurmountable. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today calling it a critical moment, stating that, quote, "Putin wants legal recognition for what he has stolen to break the principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty, and that's the main problem." Now, according to Russian state media, Kremlin aide acknowledged the peace plan ahead of those talks, but said no specific negotiations regarding it have occurred. They do expect to have those discussions in the future here with the U.S. It remains to be seen to what level that is occurring today, Andrew, but we are certainly keeping our eye on this as things quickly develop.
All right, let's get you out to the White House. That's where Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is taking some questions. Let's listen in.
And I think what Senator Mark Kelly was actually trying to do was intimidate the 1.3 million active duty service members who are currently serving in our United States Armed Forces with that video that he and his Democrat colleagues put out. Senator Mark Kelly well knows the rules of the military and the respect that one must have for the chain of command, and that all lawful orders are presumed to be legal by our service members. You can't have a functioning military if there is disorder and chaos within the ranks, and that's what these Democrat members were encouraging. It's very clear, and not a single one of them, since they've been pressed by the media, and I'll give you guys credit for that, can point to a single illegal order that this administration has given down, because it does not exist. They knew what they were doing in this video, and Senator Mark Kelly and all of them should be held accountable for that. No, because Lindsay Callaghan was legally appointed, and that's the administration's position. I know there was a judge who is clearly trying to shield Letitia James and James Comey from receiving accountability, and that's why they took this unprecedented action to throw away the indictments against these two individuals. But the Department of Justice will be appealing very soon, and it is our position that Lindsay Callaghan is extremely qualified for this position, but more importantly, was legally appointed to it. Steve.
To those indictments being thrown out. On Ukraine, is President Zelensky attempting to come to the United States this week? Are there a couple of, you mentioned on the boxing, a couple of points?
Yeah. So there are no plans at this moment in time. As you know, things can change very quickly around here, so we'll keep you all apprised, but there's no meeting scheduled right now. As for where we are, I spoke with Secretary Rubio at length. I spoke with the president as well. Everybody inside feels optimistic about what happened and transpired yesterday in Geneva. Secretary Rubio, Special Envoy Witkoff, the whole team really worked through the points of that 28-point peace plan that the United States authored with input from both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, and ultimately the vast majority of these points have been agreed upon. The Ukrainians have worked on language with us together, and you heard that from their delegation directly yesterday. So we feel as though we're in a very good place. Of course, we have to make sure that all of these points are agreed to, and then of course we're going to have to make sure the other party in this war, the Russians, agree to them as well. But I think the president deserves a great deal of credit for the amount of energy and effort he's put into trying to bring these two sides to an end of this war. He wants to see this killing stop. As for any deadlines, he wants to see this end as soon as possible.
Is the president more determined to go after Tish James and James Comey?
Go ahead.
Is the president more determined to go after Tish James and James Comey?
Excuse me. I'm answering a question from you.
You looked at me. I'm sorry.
I turned and looked at you because you're yelling. I will take a question from your colleague, and then I'll take your question too. Okay? Go ahead.
What are exactly the points of this agreement that they are still working on?
I don't want to detail sort of the technical talks that are happening right now, but there are just a couple, and we're confident that we'll be able to work through those.
The president put pressure on Putin or Zelensky if this doesn't work.
The president's been putting a lot of pressure on both leaders for this entire time.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence, and a reflection of what the Department of Justice has become under Donald Trump, which is heartbreaking.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Let's continue our walkthrough of the day's top headlines.
Trump-ordered task force to combat crime in Memphis has made more than 2,800 arrests since late September. The surge is overwhelming the local court systems in an already overcrowded jail. The task force includes federal, state, and local law enforcement, plus National Guard's troops. Officials say the jail had an average of 3,200 inmates in September, well above its 2,400 capacity. County officials are discussing opening court at night and on weekends to manage the caseloads. And Michelin star and celebrity chef David Chang says Generation Z's drinking habits are an existential threat to restaurants. Chang says young people just don't drink alcohol like previous generations. That matches up with a recent Gallup survey showing young adult drinking fell 9% between 2023 and 2025. That's a problem because restaurants typically rely on beverages for 30% of their sales. Chang warns restaurants will need to raise food prices to make up for lost beverage revenue. And a federal judge dismissing the criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. The dismissals, though, are not about the merits of these cases, but they have to do with Trump's hand-picked prosecutor, Lindsay Callaghan. A judge finding her appointment as interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia is invalid. Therefore, she doesn't have the authority to present indictments. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nate Reed is here to walk us through the decision. And Nate, you've been going over this for most of the afternoon here. What can you tell us?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, which is that this is not necessarily any sort of commentary on these charges. With Tish James, it was the allegation that she improperly obtained a mortgage for what was an investment property. She allegedly, according to this indictment, claimed that it was going to be a home that she was going to live in. and then in the case of Comey, lying to Congress under oath. Those are the basis of those two cases. So to be clear, the judge in this matter is not ruling on the merits of those cases, but issuing pretty much identical rulings in both cases, saying that the U.S. Attorney, Lindsay Halligan, was not legitimately appointed. The Congress has to confirm U.S. attorneys. The previous U.S. Attorney, Eric Siebert, he was appointed in January. His term ran for 120 days, which is the length you can be U.S. Attorney. After that date, it's up to a local jurisdiction, the courts, to then decide if the U.S. Attorney can stay or if they have to go. He then stepped down under pressure at the beginning, around the summer. Lindsay Halligan was then appointed as the U.S. Attorney. She had never had prosecutorial experience, according to these filings. She was a former White House aide, practiced insurance law, and was a lawyer for President Donald Trump. Ultimately, it was her who then secured the indictment from two federal grand juries to both indict Comey and Letitia James. Ultimately, those indictments are effectively on hold here, the judge tossing them out, saying that she was not appropriately appointed. The White House, though, fairly defiant just in the last 20 minutes or so. The White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, making clear that these cases are far from over. Take a listen.
Lindsay Halligan was legally appointed, and that's the administration's position. I know there was a judge who is clearly trying to shield Letitia James and James Comey from receiving accountability. I wouldn't say he's going after them. I think the president is more determined than ever to see accountability in this country, yes, and to correct the wrongs of the weaponization of our justice system that we saw under the previous administration and Joe Biden.
And to be clear, not a statement on the underlying merits of this case. Obviously, Carolyn Leavitt making clear that she thinks that this should have moved forward. The White House has a contrary position. It sounds very likely that they're either going to try this case over again against these two individuals who are frequent critics of President Donald Trump, has drawn his ire. In fact, he posted on True Social pretty much directing the Department of Justice to launch indictments against both of these individuals. Again, it seems likely that the Trump administration will appeal this decision up to possibly even the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Caroline Leavitt also said we aren't going to give up, which was from her conversation with the president. But talking about where the Trump administration is when it comes to these prosecutions, the bigger picture here, politically, how much of a sort of roadblock is this for an administration that has done a lot only to have it sort of thwarted or slowed down because of the legal process?
I think critics will say that this is just another time that the Trump administration has acted outside of legal bounds. Ultimately, we've seen a number of decisions that they've made over the past, 11 months now, that have been tossed out by federal courts. So, I think critics of the Trump administration, Democrats in Congress, the two prosecuted individuals here, likely to say that this is just another example of the Trump administration operating outside of the legally established bounds. At the same time, the Trump administration kind of digging in there. You heard the White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, make clear that she does think Halligan was rightfully appointed. Again, a lot of questions about whether any appeal would be successful. Congress has, according to this ruling, specifically said that U.S. attorneys are appointed for 120 days before Congress has to confirm them or lower courts have to act. So again, it's hard to see what the legal argument will be. We do not know yet what the details of the U.S.'s appeal are likely to be, but it does seem likely that the U.S. is going to appeal this one.
Thanks for spending part of your evening with Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Have a wonderful Monday night.